Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's technology webcast, Self-Service in the Cloud, What You Don't Know or Plan For Can Hurt You. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few logistical details. First off, all lines are in listen-only mode for the duration of the conference. Second, although we are on listen-only mode, we do want to hear from you. We will be answering questions at the end of the event, so please submit your questions at any time during the presentation using the Q&A box. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our featured speaker for today, Brian Wilson, who is the Vice President of Services and Support at Surgian. With more than 16 years of experience, Brian Wilson is responsible for Surgian client success through services delivery and customer support. Spanning both on-site cloud deployments and hosted engagements, his teams have architected and delivered more than 150 successful private cloud deployments, and they provide ongoing, in-depth analysis to help enterprise organizations scale with the cloud. Prior to Surgian, Brian led professional services teams at several cutting-edge technology startups, and he holds a Bachelor's of Aerospace Engineering degree from the University of Texas and a Master's of Industrial Engineering from the University of Alabama at Huntsville. Brian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nicole. Today's discussion is centered around the nature of self-service and how it can be applied to great benefit in the world of IT service and infrastructure delivery. We'll begin the discussion with an overview of self-service and its different flavors. Not everyone's self-service is the same. We'll discuss the pros and cons of these different approaches, and then we'll move on to the foundations of a successful self-service model for delivering enterprise infrastructure. To set the stage, let's spend a few minutes talking about the core problem that self-service is trying to solve in the data center. In today's business environment, user demand for IT services is increasing at a significant pace. And with today's economy, the IT budgets for hardware and staff are just not keeping up. This creates what we call the IT service delivery gap. To compound the problem of this gap, IT is serving an ever-increasing user base that is probably globally dispersed. The services being requested are increasing in complexity from the old single-server applications for development to complex multi-tier web apps that are common in the enterprise today. Growing impact of regulation and security concerns drives compliance and audit requirements across IT. The business impact of the gap is very real. IT begins to look disjointed and not aligned with corporate strategic objectives, and users see extended delivery SLAs and start to ask, why does it take 3 weeks to set up a simple application environment, and eventually they start to look for ways to work outside of IT. The IT team starts to generate a significant backlog of requests and can't keep up with new tickets, and as demand on IT increases, we start to see significant server and VM sprawl. Teams are totally focused on standing up new environments and are not focusing on reclaiming old ones. The service delivery gap is real and impacts different users in different manners. For the developer, we see repeated situations where environments are requested for 6 months when they only have 4 or 6 weeks of planned work. The common thought process by these developers is, if I'm going to have to wait for 3 weeks to get this environment, I'd better request it for longer in case I need to do something else in the future. They just don't have the confidence in IT delivery, a consistent environment configuration multiple times. The QA team is always asking for dedicated infrastructure for test activities. When they normally go through peaks and valleys of demand, they don't trust that the IT group can deliver what they want when they need it. They also know that IT is backlogged with requests, so IT can't be as agile as the QA teams need to be to set up the myriad of different configurations needed. So let's take a deeper look at the IT service delivery process without a cloud and self-service. We start with a simple user who decides he has needs a need for a specific project. He submits a request through a standard process such as a ticketing system into his IT organization. That request is going to go to several different groups, including the network, server, storage, and security engineering teams. These teams are going to evaluate the request, determine if the resources in their respective teams are available. If they're not, they're going to have to begin the procurement process to get those resources. They're also going to look to see, does that user have the right and the privilege to use those resources at the time that he's asking. This may involve back and forth with the original requester in order to clarify the request and get the needed approvals. And then once approved, it transitions over to the deployment side, where again, each one of the teams individually must work to deploy the specific area of the environment that's needed for that request. Only once all of those teams have finished their deployment cycle is the ops admin able to turn the resource back over to the user, and for the first time the user sees the environment. On average, we're seeing that take 23 days today in IT, which within today's dynamic business environment is just not acceptable to our end users. Additionally, the resources that our end users are using are typically not reclaimed,